Welcome to the show. Different fragments time, same Silicon channel.
All right. Welcome to what is actually the first European interview of the season. Like, usually they're not this deep in, but you know, so goes the scheduling. Anyway, joining us this week is, forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Foreign names are not our specialty. Like, but Evgeny Hapstin of Alawar.
Okay, guys, thanks. I'll try to do it myself. My name is Evgeny Kapustin.
Yeah, there we go.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, we so rarely get Russian developers on the program.
And I have,
That's fine.
yeah.
That's fine. It's fine.
Eh, Anyway, and indeed, you're our first developer from Siberia, Eastern Russia.
Right.
Right. And indeed, I'm especially interested to ask this question because, how did you get interested in video games? I mean, uh, I'll be honest, I have no idea what the scene looked like over there.
You mean me personally, or the situation around the eastern part of Russia?
Both.
Mhm.
Like, like
Well, actually, I joined Alawar in 2012, and basically that's where and when I joined the industry in general. Because before that, I was employed in a very different scope of activity. Um, Alawar, the company itself, was founded in 90s, and the founders of Alawar are actually from Novosibirsk. So we are based in Novosibirsk. This is eastern part of Russia, Siberia, and unlike a lot of different companies, developing companies and publishing companies who usually are based either in the western part of Russia or in Europe or in the former Soviet Union countries, the founder of Alawar, he started the company in Novosibirsk in Siberia, and he stayed there. And for all these years, almost 18 years so far, the company lives and operates in Siberia. Me myself, I actually joined Alawar in 2012, and at that time, I started as a mobile marketing manager. I was doing mostly iOS games. Later, I also promote the games on Android. And in 2016, I started to promote our titles on Steam, and it was actually well, Actually, it started happening in 2015, but in 2016, the first big title from Alawar's team was released, and that was the original Beholder 1. Before that, our company was actually one of the first publishing companies in Russia who started to sell small games through internet and through actually started digital distribution of games. We were the first in Russia who actually implemented the payment through SMS. And we, in our early days, we were the publishers of the worldwide hit farm Frenzy. After that, we also published the world famous Match 3 game, The Treasures of Montezuma. And both of these titles turned into a series of games with As far as I can remember, something like 10 or 12, 12 well, something like that, 10 or 12 different Final Fantasy add-ons. So that's, in general and briefly, that was the scene over here.
Right. And I think it might be a bit obscured now, but like you released games on platforms like Big Fish and the like back in the day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how prevalent those kind of browser portals are here in 2018, but back 10 years ago, they were pretty popular. Right? And anyway, shifting over to the Steam games, I believe you called these mid-core titles. Like,
Well, yes. We originally Alawar was developing and publishing casual games for casual audience, and what we do try developing and publishing now is some sort of mid-core games that are not that easy to call them casual, and they are not that difficult for the hardcore audience. So it's somewhere in the middle. So we just call them mid-core games.
okay, I wasn't exactly sure what the term meant, like if it was like gameplay or production values or the like. But,
I would say it's a audience oriented. So we are targeting the audience that has a certain level of user experience, game experience, that see games as an entertainment, but not that type of entertainment that you not that short session things like you usually have in your mobile phones, and not those hardcore games where you can just stick for weeks or ages. So we're somewhere in between. So it's just audience-wise approach to this term.
right. And was there any particular reason for this shift in philosophy in terms of game development?
Well, this well, I would say that this shift was an evolutionary one, because for many years we've been developing the very complicated network of distribution, and we still do have this network up and running, and we still have a stable source of income from that very network. And we wanted to make our games a bit more complicated, a bit more unique. We wanted to shift from doing games that are pretty much the same from the point of view of mechanics, and we wanted to create something new, and we were really looking at some story-based things. Some I think every developer wanted to create something unique, but we were looking for a game that would provide our users with a very different user experience. And we were experimenting a lot over the several years. We've launched and closed while soft launching several titles. And we finally came up with Beholder, which was the first one that we, let's say the first one that we actually built into a solid game, solid product.
Right. And how did the initial spark behind Beholder come about? Like what about it got fleshed into a complete game?
Um, well, the initial idea behind Beholder was a very, very simple one. An idea was that a lot of people would like to know more about their neighbors. They are well, let's say it's always interesting to know what happens behind closed doors, and that was the first idea, the first thing that Beholder grew from. We thought that a game about spying on other people, but not spying like in some action movie or some spy movie, but spying on a more, I don't know, let's say, on a simple level, like spying on your neighbors, spying on the people that surround you, may be an interesting idea for a game, especially when we thought of the popularity that different billboards have, different press has. You know, a lot of people want to know everything about the private lives of celebrities, which also is some sort of social peeping, social spying. And that's how we came up with the general idea of a small person who is spying on his neighbors. But then we wanted to make this game unique in terms of setting as well, because if you do not think of the setting of the game deep enough, you may just end up with this setting having no value. That's why we decided to pick a totalitarian state as a place where the whole game actually goes. Because when we uh, when we picked the totalitarian state, we also relieved ourselves from explaining the rules of the game to the player, because unlike some other planet with its own rules and its own history, or like some kingdom, again imaginary one, but still with its own rules and guides, we all more or less understand what a totalitarian state is, from different movies, books, from history lessons. And therefore, we already know that if you're playing as a person who is living in a totalitarian state, there should be some oppressive laws. There will be some surveillance. You may be watching your neighbors and spying on them. The government may as well spy on you. So every well, almost everything was already behind those two words, totalitarian state, with no need to actually explaining the general rules of the game. And actually, when we were developing this, we tried originally we tried to make this game a kind of a management game. So our landlord, who was running the apartment house, the apartment block with the from nine apartments. He was originally to manage these apartments. The other characters who were moving in, they were to pay the rent, and this landlord was to collect the rent and then use these in-game currency, this in-game money, to improve the house, make it a better spot for the renters, and increase the rents. And this economical cycle was one of the core mechanics of the game when we were developing the prototype. But when we went deeper into this mechanic, we actually understood that the value of a separate character was vanishing, because we're playing as a landlord, and the more we emphasize the economical side of this game, the more obvious it was becoming that you don't actually care about the characters in this game. So for you as a player, for you as for you as a landlord, they're just a source of income, source of money. And we wanted these characters to be separate people with and everyone with his or her own story, their own problems, their own situations in which our character, our landlord should feed somehow unfold these stories and make decisions to either help these people or not help them, or maybe report on them. So as we were losing um, this connection between the player and the other characters, and we were losing it because we made the economical side of the game too important, we decided to just drop the management part completely. So we will left the in-game currency. We just decided that we will use the coins that the landlord can actually get for different purposes, but we completely removed the management part from the game. And that's where the narration, the narrative parts get its importance back. So after that, we had to do a lot of additional work in terms of doing animations, in terms of making the stories deeper and more complicated, in order to build all the stories of each and every character in this game into one complicated storyline, and also make sure that every decision the player actually makes somehow affects the final ending and affects the very ending that the player will get based on what steps he or she made and what decisions he or she made. So that's, well, let's say in a nutshell, that was the way we developed Beholder, and that was how it came to be.
Well, it's an interesting narrative track because there is narrative value in going, well, the direction that you were initially going down, but certainly not on an individual level, more on a statement of society level. You know, it's like utilizing people as, well, cogs in the machine kind of deal. Like, but anyway, in terms of the atmosphere, I suppose, does this draw upon the lessons of history, or in any fashion, or rather, like, does anyone at Alawar, did they have any experiences with the old Soviet days?
No, we actually didn't. Well, we all. Let's say I understand what you're asking about, but we do not have this kind of personal experience that you're talking about. We just all know these facts from the history lessons.
Right.
As you actually mentioned, the approach that we initially stick to could work out if we were developing a kind of a macro management game where we are managing society. But our initial target, we actually were aiming at a very personal emotions. Since we saw Beholder as a game of choices, it was very important for us that every player can make their own choice and face their own consequences, and somehow feel about themselves while they were making the choices. So for us, it was very very important to place a player into a situation where there seemed to be no way out. There may be several options, but none of them looked like a good decision. And this point when a player has to choose between maybe two evils or maybe two not that good options, and the feelings and emotions at the point of making this choice, this was very important for us. And it just happens. It just happened that a totalitarian state was the almost ideal environment for building up a situation with no good outcome. So I would say that this was more a coincidence rather than rather than a choice. But once we understood that the setting was ideal for the kind of emotions that we would like players to experience, we did uh, we did actually add some things from history, some things from current modern times, some things we just imagined and made up, and they did happen several months after we made them up and integrated in our storylines. Some things that we actually made up has well haven't happened yet, and we do hope they will never happen. But still, I would say that these are just the consequences. This is just a coincidence. We didn't want to make our games some kind of a moral lesson from the history or something like this. No, we're making games for entertainment.
No, I get that. I get that. And there are other games out there that do make statements on both um, totalitarian societies and specifics, and also the whole meat grinder aspect of a totalitarian society. But uh, there are different tracks to take. And have you ever gotten any feedback on Beholder from the people who played it?
Oh yes, I mean we actually before launching Beholder in November 2016, we ran a closed beta test, uh, which is not very common thing for such small titles. By the way, but we still did it because first of all we were well, let's say we were nervous. To a certain extent, we were even afraid of launching this game because it was very different from what we have been doing before. Uh, and that's why we needed to run at least a small beta, closed beta test in order to at least find out whether or not the tutorial is okay and clear and mechanics are okay, and whether or not the technical side is fine. Maybe there are too many bugs and so on and so forth. But we didn't expect that, but we have received an overwhelmingly positive feedback. Moreover, around 27,000 people played the beta version, the closed beta version, and according to our surveys that we asked players to complete after they played the beta version, 98% of players were satisfied with both the storyline, with both the mechanics, with both the art style, and the technical part. So there were bugs and crashes, but very minor things to actually fix. And the game itself, though it was very dark and very depressing, players did like it. Did like it because of the stories. Uh, when oh, there are a lot of players who would like to see a story within a game, not actually a game that is a service. We Those who actually play free-to-play games, they know that there is a game as a service and blah blah blah. But again, there is a very huge, uh, a very huge amount of people, of players who value the games with stories and the games that are story-rich. And Beholder, in this case, was a very story-rich game, which was very good for the players. And as for the, let's say, historical side of the story, we've got a lot of messages from players who saw Beholder as a game about Soviet Union. On the other hand, we received a lot of messages stating that this game is about Germany. Some players even said that this was a game about United States or Canada, and there was one player who told us that this game was about his home country, Hungary. So, so people, players, a lot of players saw different countries in this game, which, again, in my opinion, proves the fact that uh, the story is in the eye of the beholder. Every player, every beholder in our game sees their own country, their own time, their own state, and that's I think it's that's amazing. I think.
Like, yeah, I mean, there are definitely some modern touches that can be applied, especially like in regards to the West, that the all-seeing cameras, not just like in the United States, but UK and so on and so forth. It's like, so yeah, it's not surprising that the Beholder has a universality to it that is also unfortunate. But anyway, so I'm presuming that this game was a fair success, yes?
Yep, it was. It is. I hope it will be.
Well, it's like because there is a sequel currently in development. Indeed, though, if you've been watching the stream, we've been showcasing some beta footage, and indeed, the first thing I noticed when I played the beta was, well, first that the graphics have shifted quite a bit. It's no longer a 2D game; it's now 3D. And I'm wondering, was there any particular reason behind that shift in dimensions?
I would say that this is a natural flow, a natural step, because the first Beholder was a kind of a 2D, but it already at that time it has some shades of being a 3D game. Oh, okay, let's put it this way. Since the first game, the first part, Beholder, originally was developing as a economical management game, the choice of a 2D style and this house where you can either see all the apartments or scale to a certain apartment was a good choice for the mechanics of managing the house. But since we were developing a kind of an adventure game, we thought that 3D for the second part would be a better choice because, frankly speaking, when original Beholder released, it wasn't in the state that we would like it to see, because we didn't have enough time to turn it from the economical management into the story game that we were developing, because we understood this trouble with the economical side too late. And that's why if you know that we were developing economical strategy or economical management game, with this knowledge in your head, if you played the original Beholder, you will clearly see the elements of the user interface that were designed especially for this type of mechanics. And that's when we decided to develop and release the second part, Beholder 2. We knew from the beginning that we are developing an adventure game with the stories of the characters being the central part of this game. And that's why we completely redesigned the game itself, and we shifted to 3D in order to make it more vivid, and hopefully with the shift we still preserve the style and the atmosphere of the first vanilla game.
Hmm. And indeed, that does answer my next question, which was, the whole shift in genre. And I suspect it was because, you wanted to fully embrace the narrative structure that you were going with. And,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and indeed, it seems like the management elements of the first game were vestigial. Um, on that note, outside of the management elements being
Adam,
Yeah, I think he dropped again.
I'm not
hello?
seeing if. Okay, you dropped for a second there.
Oh, well.
Last thing we heard was the management.
Okay, what I was getting at was what else has changed in Beholder 2?
Uh, well, let's. Well, the visual part is actually what you've already mentioned is shifting from 2D to 3D. Um, the uh, the general mechanics, again, as you mentioned, we completely dropped the strategy and we are focusing on the narrative part. Then, generally, conceptually, we moved from a single scene game to a multiple scene game. So here we follow the story rather than the monitor, you know. So we decided that if we want to have a 100% adventure game with a story, with deep stories in there, we have to move from a single scene to multiple scenes. That's why in Beholder 2, there will be well, there will be many locations. Another very important part of the game is introducing mini games. Basically, in the beta version, where we feature the floor of the ministry, you can play the first mini game of the several that we will have in the full version, which is talking to the people and processing the applications from the citizens. Um, why why was it a very important thing? Because these mini games they significantly increase the player time of the game, and they also add another way of progressing because in Beholder 2 you will be having specific targets for each of the floors, and in order to reach the targets you will be able to choose different pathways to the target that is set in front of you at the beginning of every floor. So mini games are one of the ways to get to your target easily, more easily, I would say. Uh, what else? Well, probably probably general attitude because the first part of the game was about a small person in a very big state. This person was a weak one, whereas the state was very hard and very strong, and it was a kind of a philosophical drama, maybe from some point of view. Beholder 2 will be featuring the ministry. Actually, this very some ministerial ministry, the prime ministry of the state, where everything is happening and where the powers are concentrated. And we decided to, to increase the level of absurdity, because basically, as we know from different books and films, a totalitarian state is a place where sooner or later you will come across some stupidity, some absurd. And in Beholder 2, we decided that we will raise the level of this as high as we could. So I would say that Beholder 2, to a certain extent, will be a more humorous game, but maybe the humor will be darker.
I can imagine. And how strong are the narrative links from Beholder 1 to Beholder 2, outside of the protagonist being the son of the first?
Um, let me see. I'm afraid I will not be able to say much because spoiler alerts.
Right.
Well, yes, there will be connections, of course, not only because this is the second part of the first part of the game, not because the universe is still the same, but we do have the connections on the character level. And I would say that this is the end of my answer. There will be connections, and we do hope that those people who played Beholder 1 will like these connections.
I hope they do. And as far as the beta goes, how much of the game can a person play currently? How long is this beta lasting, and how can people access this beta?
Okay. Well, it really depends on the first of all, it really depends on the decisions that you made while playing, and it really depends on whether or not you would like to come to several endings. Actually, you can go through the beta version. One playthrough will take you from, well, let's say between 1 and 2 hours. If you spend more time playing mini games, it will last longer. If you want to change your mind and make some different decision at some part of the game, you can easily increase the time you play beta to 3 hours. The final version will have, well, we hope that by the release date we will be able to bring you around 6 hours of a single playthrough. We hope we will not have to cut a lot of features, but we will have to do some small feature cutting. But again, this will be a single playthrough. If you want to spend more time playing mini games, or you would like to have a different alternative ending to this game, you can easily double the time you can spend in this game. As for the beta version of Beholder 2, now the beta is available on our official website, which is www.beholder2.com. There you can sign up for the beta version, and once your email is confirmed, you will receive the link to download the beta. Unfortunately, we are not distributing this beta version through Steam, but again, if you want to see this beta in your Steam library, you can simply add this downloadable beta version to it. And again, if you own the vanilla game, if you have purchased Beholder 1 in Steam, you already have Beholder 2 beta in your library. You just didn't receive any notification from Steam, but if you have Beholder 1 in your Steam library, right next to it, there will be Beholder 2 beta. So you can just download it and try.
Okay. And let's see if my colleagues have any more questions on the Beholder series here.
Do you really need to have played Beholder 1 to understand Beholder 2, or is they just kind of self-contained but references to, like, the first one?
Um, no, they are self-contained. Of course, they are, but it's a kind of a it's a kind of a universe that these games are existing in that will make the experience from playing Beholder 2 richer if you play Beholder 1. Because these two games, they feature different characters in different situations, in different spots. So if you haven't played Beholder, you can play Beholder 2, and you will get say 99% of the content that we give you. So these may be 1-2% of the things that connect Beholder 1 and Beholder 2 may be unnoticeable for you. But again, if you played Beholder, the vanilla game, let's say you will love Beholder 2 much more than compared to those people who haven't tried Beholder.
And I think that's it on my questions.
Galix?
Yeah, I had some questions, but I think they mostly have been answered. So
Okay. All right. Well, I'll conclude the line of questioning by asking, how far away is the final version of Beholder 2?
Well, it definitely 2018. It's the last quarter of the year. Probably I will not be able to give you even the exact month, but it's sooner than you think.
so before the end of the year, then.
Let's say it's before the end of the year, and it's not December. Well, that's all that I can say.
I'm like, okay. And do you have any sort of pricing planned out yet, or is that still under wraps?
We're still discussing the price internally, but I would say it will be affordable for what we've learned from releasing Beholder game. And well, actually, Beholder, the first game is 9.99, and we expect Beholder 2 to be much longer with much more content that the first game has, and it will be slightly more expensive. But again, compared to what you get for this price, it will be just fine.
I think I could guess where this would end up, but I'll leave that on the floor, so to speak. Anyway, is this game only coming to like Steam and Windows, or is it going to be on other platforms?
The initial release will be on Steam. It will be for Windows and Mac version and Linux as well. Then we do plan to develop the mobile versions for iOS and Android, and we're also planning to do the versions for the consoles, Xbox, PS4, We're looking forward to start Switch development, but at this point in time, I'm not sure about the priorities. So we do plan to come to mobile and consoles as well, but which comes first, it's not yet confirmed.
Okay. Well, that makes sense since um, working on a Switch version has its quirks, let's just say.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that our developers are actually experiencing with porting the first game to Switch. So probably in the nearest future, we will see Beholder on Switch. And if everything is okay, Beholder 2 will be on Switch as well.
And I suppose in regards to Beholder on Switch, are there going to be any like unique features that take advantage of the system, or is it just going to be like a vanilla port?
I think that the first Beholder will be vanilla port, but this is where I'm not sure at all. So let's let's live and see, because this is not the information that I can just fully rely on.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Like, anyway, let's see. Shifting a bit, can you briefly tell us about some of the other mid-core games you got going here, like Do Not Feed the Monkeys and I Am Not a Monster?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Basically, basically, Beholder was released in November 2016, and the next year, 2017, August 2017, we released another game, which was a Polar survival game made by our internal studio, Cheerdealers. And actually, this Thursday, 27th of September, we are releasing another game by Cheerdealers called I'm Not a Monster. This is a kind of a kind of a XCOM game in terms of mechanics, but that features a lot of different mechanics from Werewolf card game. So basically, it's a multiplayer for a team of 6 players, where you find yourself on a starship that was attacked by monsters. And the main thing is that monsters can take shape of human beings, and you don't know whether or not the civilian that is in front of you is a monster or not. So you and your 5 teammates are on this starship, and the roles in this game are randomly assigned. So once you start playing, you are assigned a role of either a monster or a civilian. So for 6 players, there will be 4 civilians and 2 monsters. And you don't know who your teammates are. Are they civilians or are they monsters? Until they tell you if they're stupid enough, or until you somehow figure them out. And that's actually the core gameplay. So the game will feature several modes. One of them will be finding and killing the monster. Another of them will be saving civilians, because apart from you and your 5 teammates, there will be several civilians on the plane, on the starship. And those of you who play as civilians will have to rescue the other, well, not players, but the other characters. And the ones who play as monsters will have to infect as many civilians as possible. So this game releases this Thursday, and by the way, we are releasing it with the Steam free weekends. So basically, once the game is out, it's free to play till Sunday. Mm-hmm. And if you like it, you will be able to get the full version with the 20% discount for the first week since the initial release. Another game that we are that we are working on is Do Not Feed the Monkeys, and this is the game that we are publishing because this is the game by an indie developed studio from Spain, Victorama Games, and this is a truly indie title. Just that very indie that the industry loves, because the studio is three brothers. Two of them are also musicians, and they actually did the soundtrack for their first game, which they published with another publisher, but they developed on their own. So, Do Not Feed the Monkeys is again, this is a game of choice, game of choices, and that's why we were very happy when we saw this game and when we agreed with the studio to be the publishers of this game, because it is in well, not in general, but it's very similar to what we do in Beholder. From the one hand, it's a game about spying. From other hand, it's a game about making choices. In a nutshell, it's a game about a person who is spying on other people through surveillance cameras. A kind of a kind of a secret society that you become a member of, and you have an access to some public cameras, some compromised webcams, some surveillance cameras, and you are able to just watch how other people live. And you have a choice either to just see what they do, find their secrets, gather information, or you can somehow interact with these people. And since this is a secret society, they operate under the name of some primate observation club, where primates stands for people, and interacting with these people actually is called feeding the monkeys. And that's why the game itself is called Do Not Feed the Monkeys, because the rules of this secret club prohibit you to interact with the people that you are watching, and if you do, something may happen. What exactly is happening, you will be able to find out when you play this game. And unlike Beholder, this is, first of all, it's a pixel art game, very good looking. And secondly, it's a very humorous game. It's not that dark. It's very funny. It's very colorful, and I would say sometimes it's even very adult funny. So, by the way, we are running another closed beta of this game at the moment. So if you want to try the beta version of this Spain-based indie studio, you can go to our website, which is www.don'tfeedthemonkeys.com. And again, you subscribe for news, and when you confirm your email address, you will get the links to download the beta version.
All right. Any other games to mention at this point?
Let's say that all these three titles that I've been talking about, which are I'm Not a Monster, Do Not Feed the Monkeys, and Beholder 2, these are the releases that you will see till the end of this year. And in 2009, we're going to announce another game. It hasn't got an official name yet, but I can say that it's going to be a multiplayer. It's going to be a shooter multiplayer, and we are going to release it next year, and we will start 2019 with an official announcement and some kind of a beta test, the details of which you will be able to learn from, well, let's say from any of our official channels, and even through the channels of official channels of our games.
Hmm. Okay. Right then. I'd like to thank you for coming out and taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. Um,
Thanks for inviting me, guys.
no problem. No problem. Um, you know, hopefully we'll have you on the program again when that next game is ready to be talked about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and anyway, the games are Beholder 2, I Am Not a Monster, and Do Not Feed the Monkeys. Look for them on Steam later in the year. Right? And right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as we welcome Zachary Manco of Mad Cat Studios, and we're going to be talking about a Kickstarter. We're going to be talking about Log Jammers, a lumberjack version of the game Windjammers. Like, um, it's got a wooden NES cart. Not even
Yeah.
joking about that. Like, so this is going to be interesting. Like, right. So until tomorrow, I shall wish you good gaming.